What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Drunk Fish Keeping. That is refreshing. Tonight's video is all about food, what to feed and how to feed. Now, when you are preparing your tank and selecting your fish, one of the items that I think gets looked over a lot in the beginning aquarist is proper food for your fish. And that really depends on the fish that you're keeping. There are options in the food world, from flakes to pellets to tablets to frozen preparations to vegetable-based preparations, all of which are designed to meet the fish and the criteria of the fish you're keeping's dietary needs. One of the fish that a lot of people, I think, have a hard time with feeding correctly sometimes are tangs. Tangs are a fish that does primarily eat vegetable-based material, algae, things like that. They will eat meaty preparations, and it is good to feed them meaty preparations, but they are not a strictly carnivorous species like anthias or wrasse or clowns or angelfish, which are also real popular saltwater fish species. Tangs, as you will see, my Scopus tang back here going to work. I'm actually eating a piece of algae as we speak, which this is a really cool tang species that I think a lot of people don't give as much credit to, just for the fact that it's not the most vibrant tang species, but they're a workhorse when it comes to clearing algae out of a tank. Case in point, the other day I had a lot of brown algae, hair algae in the tank, and that's just because I'm still trying to dial in the correct UV setting that I want on these hydras to fit for the tank. So I was getting a bit of an algae bloom. I put the Scopus tang in on Sunday, and within 3 days there's almost no algae left on the rock. He's picking it like there's no tomorrow. I almost got to the point the other day I actually did put some algae supplements in there just to make sure he was okay, which by algae supplements I mean this. This is basically dehydrated sheets of algae with garlic extract just to entice the fish to eat. This comes in a huge pack. I've had this for about 3 months, and you break off small sections of it. Comes in sheets. You just break off a small section of sheet, hook it to a clip, rubber band to a rock, however you want to do it, and they pick at it at their leisure. If you have tangs or you have certain angels, things like that, that's kind of what you're going to need to back them up, because this will help out if you have multiple tangs in a tank and they're just picking your existing algae off your live rock. Like I said, $6. I've had this for a while, so not a bad product to get. The thing with meaty preparations, there's a lot of meaty preparations out there. You can get frozen brine, frozen mysis. Most of those products are going to be vitamin enriched. I usually use Haraki. It's a really good brand. Their price point is good. Haraki will do most of these in a kind of a flash freezed cube that will pretty much break up pretty quick. They do have a little bit of an additional oil built into them to help stabilize them. I generally will wash that off if I'm putting it in the tank, just so I don't add additional oils into the tank. It's just extra bio load to be absorbed and to be filtered out. There's another product which I'm actually going to show you guys because it is a really impressive product, and I've been using it now for probably about 8 to 9 months, and it is called LRS. Another name for that would be Larry's Reef Supply. Now, this is basically minced fish meat, roe, fish parts, mollusk, crab, any type of marine flesh, except for mammal flesh, pretty much mixed up. In fact, we'll read this off real quick. You have scallop, shrimp, perch, whitefish, mysis, krill, squid, clam, oyster, rotifers, seaweed, broccoli tips, oyster eggs, oyster ovarian tissue, fatty acids, ascorbics, things like that. Good amount of protein, has probiotics, vitamin enriched, comes in a thin pack, and case in point, I've had this pack for going on 4 weeks. You're breaking off dime to quarter size chunks, and they will feed 8 fish in my tank. and I usually will feed that at night is the final feed for the day. Another one I use too, if I can grab this, is roe, which I use Reef Nutrition. Their roe, it's basically fish eggs. A small squirt of this will do a lot. They're very, very tiny eggs. You put a couple drops in a small tank, my 120, I maybe put a teaspoonful in. It's a great little feeder for the fish. It fans out. They have plenty to eat. Oh, sorry, beer and tacos. Best for drunk fish keeping. So when you're getting into feeding, some of these fish will accept pellets, some will accept flake. Flake food's not bad, pellets not bad, because you can get an insured vitamin load that will help with the fish. One of the reasons why I use the LRS, the Layers Reef Supply, is because it is loaded with pretty much everything you need. I will feed a little bit of a flake food every once in a while just to help give some additional vitamin punch to the tank, just to make sure there's nothing missing in the diet. But my guys are pretty spoiled with the Larry's, and having that availability for pretty fresh meat, so they tend to not to go after the flake stuff as much. Another fish that a lot of people have a hard time with, Mandarin Dragonet, which if anyone sees this, that is my Mandarin Dragonet tattoo. If you can tell how much I like the fish. They are not as hard to keep as people say, but you have to make special consideration for their dietary restrictions, which is basically copepods. Now, there's two schools of thought. The most classic school of thought is establish a thriving pod population in a tank, either doing it in the tank with no additional predation or in a refugium, and either cycle rock or have it to where the refugium can supply the main display tank with pods. Depending upon the tank, there's another way to do it, and this is the way I did in my 13-gallon Evo. Is I put the Mandarin in, and I bought a bottle of Atlantic Bio pods every week and dosed daily to feed my Mandarin Dragonet while the pod population established. When I sold that tank, you could shine a light in the substrate on the rock, and it was crawling with pods. So that fish prefers to pick pods off as it eats during the day. They're not going to eat at once, and they really do not accept food from people. Most of the fish in my tank now, such as I've got, like I said, my two clownfish back here, a green lyre-tail anthias, 4 blue-green chromis, and the 1 scopus tang. They'll eat out of my hand pretty much off the bat. They see me, I stick my hand in the tank, they know there's food coming. In fact, when I do tank maintenance and clean, these guys are nipping at my hands because they're wanting food. That's what they've been trained to do. Mandarins will not do that. There is a rare occasion you will get a mandarin to eat frozen food, but that is a rare occasion. They are normally going to be a copepod only style fish. Now, when you get into certain fish that are more suited for a fish only live rock tank, such as sharks, groupers, eels, puffers, snappers, things like that, lionfish. They are big on eating large quantities of meat. That is their main diet. Silver sides are a good option. Since I don't have a predator style tank, I don't really feed those. And that really comes into why people have reef tanks and fish only live rock tanks. So I'll do a video on that another night and really get into the differences between those two tanks. Your groupers, the reason why they're usually not good for a reef tank, they'll eat anything they can fit in their mouth. So if I put a grouper in here now, even as a juvenile, pretty much everything except that scopus, tang, and that anthias are probably going to be on the menu. Certain eels can be reef safe. Snowflakes are like a really good choice. A tessellated eel, they're pretty chill. You get into like your yellow morays and some of your other moray species, they will eat a fish if the opportunity presents itself. If they are hungry and something's near them and they can get it, they will eat it. Like your angels and some of your fox faces, some of your wrasse species will kind of nip and peck at the polyps on coral. Ornamental crabs, ornamental clams, ornamental shrimps, they'll go after them. So when you're feeding, you got to make sure that you're selecting the right food, one, for vitamin enrichment, and two, to make sure that you don't have a fish that's not eating what's in the tank and gets hungry and tries to take a chunk out of a $100 fish. So that's not very helpful in the scope of things. Another good point when it comes to feeding is you need to really look into stats of how you feed your fish. Certain fish are fine to be fed once a day. Certain fish need to be fed twice, sometimes multiple times a day. Antheists are a good example of that. Antheists usually want to eat multiple times a day. Now, considering that I have a work schedule that keeps me away from my house for 12 to 13 hours a day, I normally would give a small food or small feeding in the morning, and then when I get home I put a small feeding in, and then I make another preparation after probably about an hour or 2 hours after that. I make another preparation for the fish to eat, and then I usually shut the tank down for the night as far as lights, reduce power heads, things like that, so the fish can kind of rest for the night and the other species in the tank can kind of chill out and get a actual night's sleep. Certain fish, like tangs, they're a great example of make sure you have enough algae for them and feed them a meaty preparation or some form of a high quality flake, and they will usually do pretty well. Clowns are pretty straightforward. They're going to eat pretty much anything they can get their mouths on. They'll eat flake, they'll eat pellet. My clowns are kind of piggies. They'll eat about anything. My Scopus, he's a little more picky. He goes after certain parts. For angelfish folks, certain angelfish are pretty hardcore when it comes to eating spongiforms, and they really want the sponges. That's one of the cool parts about the LRS, is that it also includes sponges, so it does have some preparation for your your angelfish that don't generally want to go after certain foods. A kind of final parting thought when it comes to feeding your fish and things like that is the habit of overfeeding. It's not wise to always overfeed. Maybe sometimes it's better to feed smaller amounts multiple times throughout the day so the fish have a chance to eat and can enjoy it without having a lot of wasted food. I just fed, and you can probably see on my one overflow back here, there is a little bit of food left over, which those guys will get to that here in a minute because this is their only second feeding of the day. So you can see my Scopus, he's kind of going after a little bit of the meaty stuff, but he's right now on the hunt for algae. He's really going to town on the algae. So, in kind of closing on this video tonight, you need to, make sure you're feeding correctly for what you have in the tank. Make sure you're meeting the correct dietary needs of the fish, because that's going to help with color, vibrance. It's going to help reduce disease and stress level on fish. And if you're doing a reef, with a lot of reefs, you have to do a lot of suspended style foods, reef snow and things like that, which I'll do a video on, what you want to feed coral and how you want to dose and treat coral, because there's a million options out there for feeding those guys. Some of the coral will benefit from having some of the, roe and some of the meaty preparations floating around the tank. Certain corals don't get that. They only absorb nutrients in a different way, but that's a whole nother video. So, like I said, really do the research on the fish you want for the tank you want. Probably going to do a bigger video in the next few days when I go more time as far as, picking out the right fish for the tank and, appropriate tank sizes and things like that, because I think a lot of that gets misconstrued in general rules of, tank size per fish and things like that. And it's really that adage of, an inch of fish per gallon of water is really not a good rule to use, because if you use that rule, you could end up with a flamingo tang in a 200-gallon tank. If you use that rule to its core, not the best thing to do. But comments, questions, put them down there. I've got a couple of new video ideas working. I actually talked to the owner of the LFS I go to the other day. We're going to be doing a video next week. I want to get you guys in there and let you kind of see some stuff and do some cool stuff in there. So if you got any questions or comments, put them down below. If you like the video, give me a like, subscribe if you want to see more drunk fish keeping. But anyway, guys, appreciate it and have a good day.